grab your coffee because today I'm in collaboration with the Pop of Tea podcast hosts, Sydney and Danielle. And we are going to be talking about Demi Lovato's new documentary, Dancing with the Devil, episodes 1 and 2. This is your deep dive that you didn't ask for, but definitely need. If you're listening to this and you've already watched it, welcome. And if you haven't watched it, you're welcome to listen to this first and then go kind of explore it for yourself. Mm-hmm. But this deep dive should be pretty in depth. Just starting out, the thing that I thought was super, super interesting about this was how they framed it. So they kind of tell us that they were already recording a documentary for Demi Lovato about her Tell Me You Love Me world tour. So the documentary started a month before her OD happened. And when it happened, it was put on pause and they, waited for her to recover, didn't know what was going to happen to the series. And then when she made a recovery, she thought back about it and said, it wasn't honest. And I just want to be honest now. So let's redo the whole thing and talk about this overdose, right?
What's really crazy is I saw her on her Tell Me You Love Me tour. 3 months.
Where were you at?
Philadelphia.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. I saw her. It was 4 months before the OD. And I mean, it was a great concert. It was a great show, but I do remember kind of noticing that she didn't seem super animated. And I guess that was when she was, taking hard drugs.
Yeah. Cause that concert was in March.
Right? It was in March of 2017 or 2018.
2018. Yeah.
2018. Yes. Mm-hmm. Man.
Yeah. And that's good. That's good to note too, because this all is taking place in 2018.
Yes.
Which it feels like this happened literally yesterday. When they said 2018, I was like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe it's
3 years.
3 years. Does not feel like 3 years.
This documentary was really cool because it gave kind of a deeper look into her life and humanized her in a lot of ways, starting with the relationship she had with her dad, which she was super open and honest about. She talks about it in the documentary and she says, the relationship was always strained because he had mental health issues. I believe he was bipolar and schizophrenic and also had addiction issues. So this isn't really a secret. She's kind of talked about this in previous documentaries she's done and interviews she's done. But since this filmed, he's passed away and that kind of sparked something in her. So in a clip from one of her performances on tour, she is talking to the audience about how she's pretty scared to end up like her dad. And, her mom also struggled with addiction and eating disorders, which Demi says is true for her as well. We kind of know that too.
Yeah.
That whole thing with her father was crazy to me. Cause yes, I guess I knew that they had somewhat of a strained relationship, but I missed it. I don't know if she's ever really gotten that in depth with that.
She has a song called Daddy Issues.
Yes, which actually is a good song.
It's
more like poppy. Yeah. It's not necessarily
you might not think that's she really had issues or something.
When she was talking about her dad and how they didn't even know what day he died and it was around Father's Day and this and that, and I was thinking I can't relate because my relationship isn't like that with my father, but when she was talking about him, that's really unfortunate. And it's a shame that her dad was an addict and then her mother struggled with eating disorders. And it's how could she not struggle with some of these things? It's only, I feel like, natural that she would inhabit some of these things.
We get a lot of good qualities from our parents, and I'm sure she inherited a ton of great qualities from her mom and her dad. Yeah. But it is unfortunate that she kind of got the worst of both worlds too. They both struggled with addiction and she did. Her father struggled with mental health disorders and she does. And her mom had eating disorders and she does, which come into play later in the series, which we'll talk about. But I think it kind of all started for her when she was put in pageants. So she talks about being a young girl and being in these pageants and seeing how skinny everybody else was and kind of telling herself, if I don't win this, I'm never eating again. And then, what happens right after these pageants is she gets cast on TV and she goes to Disney, and it's the constant in front of the camera type of lifestyle that it totally was toxic for her and kind of pushed her into these eating disorders that she got, then and still struggles with today. The docuseries talks to her friends, her former assistants, her parents, her creative directors, and every person across the board says that her eating disorder, especially I think during her Tell Me You Love Me tour, was so bad that they couldn't even eat certain things in front of her. And when she would kind of slip up and eat something as simple as like a cookie, she would have a complete emotional breakdown, and her assistant would have to spend the night
Stay there. Yeah.
to support her emotionally, which I just think it's so difficult because she has a positive message as a performer and as an artist. But at the same time, like, you hear from her team and they love her, but the experience of being on that tour with her was like hell.
Yeah, I think it was her choreographer, Danny, who said something along those lines. Like, it should have been such an amazing, great thing. And while it was emotionally like exhausting. Having to worry. Like, there was times they said she couldn't be around anyone who wasn't sober. Everyone around her had to be drug tested. Like, they had to make sure that she was so focus on what she was supposed to be doing and not get involved in the other, bad things, that it almost drove her to that.
Yeah, they squeeze too tight. Like, when you have too much pressure around you like that, I feel like it's not good.
It is hard because you have so many, not even like eyes on you, which you do, which is kind of what, I don't want to say caused the eating disorder, because I don't know that that was the root of it, but definitely pushed it further in her life. But besides the eyes, besides the eyes on her, there were people depending on her. And I think that's what's hard too. Like, you have to think about what goes into a production from a business standpoint. Her assistant, her dancers, her choreographers, the people who are doing the set design, those people are making a living off of
her.
assuming that she's going to show up and be able to perform.
I actually thought about that.
Yeah. It's
like
true.
Without her, these people don't have a job. So maybe you are, I guess.
That's a ton of pressure.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. And I think later in episode 2, when her sister's kind of talking about how she didn't ask for this, she didn't ask to be somebody's role model or, whatever, she says something along that line. I mean, I think it was more in reference to her days as an actress and when she was on TV. Like having people depend on you to show up to set and to be able to remember your lines. But really, I mean, being a performing artist is the same way. Being a singer is the same exact thing, except for almost worse, because you have live audiences who are showing up, paying a ton of money to see you. And when they show that clip, you can speak to this because you went to one of her concerts, but they show a clip of her, which I'll mention later, of her forgetting the lines to her song to sober. Which has like so much of a deeper meaning once she kind of reveals what it's about and what was going on during that time. But
that was crazy. Yes. When she wrote it and everything.
Yeah. But she was in the documentary, when they show the clip of her forgetting the lines, she was in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I'm from. And I can only imagine, like, as a fan, I mean, like, I am a Fleetwood Mac fan, let's say, and I paid a lot of money to see them. If I would have shown up and they would have forgotten the lines, I would have been like, why am I even here?
Yeah, that's not a good look.
No, not at all. And it is important too to remember what her family said in this documentary and in her last one. Before her overdose, she released a documentary. And the theme is that Demi Lovato is very good at portraying what she wants people to see and not really what's going on the inside. So because her fans at this time thought that she was sober given the song, and there really wasn't an excuse for not knowing a song that's supposed to have such an impact on you personally, why you wrote it. I think that would be really disheartening, especially for her younger fans who are looking up to her.
Yeah, looking back at the concerts, I mean, she just seemed a little off, like, I will say, but I I didn't really know at the time what, obviously I didn't know what she was going through, but I also wasn't sure where she stood with her sobriety, because I guess celebrities don't really come out and say, hey, I'm not sober anymore, or vice versa. So I don't know. It was a great show, but yeah, it was kind of like, huh, like she, she looks like she is battling with something, but I had no idea that it was all of that she was that was happening. So,
Yeah, and her friends, going back a little bit, her friends
mhm,
said she is really good at hiding things. And
yeah,
I guess being in the public eye like that
you
and
have to
having
be.
gone through this before, she probably is very good at hiding things. And,
Hmm.
they knew she had gotten back into drinking a little bit, but they didn't know the extent of, the
Right.
drugs she was using and things like that.
When you said that you didn't know as a fan the extent, I mean, I think you're not alone. Like you're saying, even people who
Right.
were
Like we
close
have
to
no
her,
idea.
yeah,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
people who were close to her in her
Mhm.
personal life had no
Yeah.
idea what was going on. And that kind of takes us back to her eating disorder, because that seems like the only issue that people really knew about. And that's because she was doing like extreme exercise routines, extreme
Hmm.
dieting. There were nutritionists and people around her controlling every single thing that she ate. She says that she's always been open about her eating disorder and her mental health, which you have to give her credit. She has been, maybe not
Yeah.
open about when she's struggling, but open about the fact that she does struggle and has had struggles. Being open about your mental health, especially when you're such a celebrity and you have so many people looking up to you, almost makes the pressure to not slip up more intense.
Yeah.
I would think so too. Yeah, because you have all these extra eyes on you. It's not just your close circle of your family and friends. It's so much more than that. And I'm sure she doesn't want to let people down, like her fans and everything. So I'm sure that
Yeah.
that's an extra added pressure
Yeah.
to the
Hmm.
whole thing.
Yeah. And I think once you start being public as a celebrity or as a public figure about different struggles you're having in your life, like mental health or eating disorders or sobriety, it's very difficult to let people in halfway, meaning, you know, not only did she tell us about it in previous documentaries and interviews and shows, she's been open about it. She's been an advocate for it,
Hmm.
and, an advocate for the prevention of it. And she kind of wanted the best of both worlds, where it's like, I'm open that it has happened to me and I'm going to advocate for others, but it still is happening and I don't want to
Mhm.
show that. And I think that that's just kind of a slippery slope to go down for
Hmm.
anybody. So after, we talk about her eating disorder and we hear about kind of how strict her routine was, she talks a little bit about her relapse. So
Mhm.
Hmm.
when we say relapse, we mean into substance abuse, including alcohol and harder drugs. So how did we even get here? How did we even get to this OD, right? Because she was clean for so long, and what happened. In the documentary, she's really open about how it happened. And I think that this was kind of cool, just as somebody, not even for a celebrity, but rarely do we hear addicts talk about the moment that they relapsed and what
Mhm.
went on mentally for them.
It was good to hear, and I'm glad that she was open to kind of explaining, like, this night I bought a bottle of red wine, went to a part, like she explained in such
The steps.
detail.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's making herself really vulnerable and putting herself out there. But I think as a fan and as a viewer, you kind of are curious about those things and you want to know the gritty details. So I thought it was, good that she shared them, just because that's the questions that we wanted answered.
Yeah. I think a lot of people can relate too, just to that, like how it starts off with wine, and then, next thing you know, you're taking pills because you can't get this or that. And I don't know. I think that happens to a lot of people. So I think it's very relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really shows you how fragile the mental state is of somebody who struggles
Hmm.
with addiction or anything, related to what Demi was going through. Because
Hmm.
when we heard that she overdosed and it kind of set in for fans and people who follow pop culture, that she had obviously been using drugs again, I think the assumption is like, oh, something crazy must have happened. It must have been like a crazy relapse and a breakup and all of this just, stuff.
Mhm.
And when she tells the story, which, I'll repeat it on the podcast here, but it's so, I don't want to use the word mundane because that almost downplays it, but it's so typical. It's like something that
Mhm.
any celebrity does. And just in a moment of weakness, she kind of relapsed, So
I don't keep tabs on necessarily what Demi Lovato is doing, or any celebrity for that case, as far as like their drug use and things like that. I'm not,
Mhm.
but I felt like it seemed like a shock, like Demi Lovato overdose. Yeah, you're thinking, something big must have happened that led her to do this, but really it kind of was a bunch of different things that kind of led up to this.
That led up.
Yeah, and it wasn't as random, I don't
She
think,
just like
as we thought.
she crossed the line a little too far. Like she just pushed it too far.
yeah,
Well, and she didn't realize actually what she was taking. Like it was laced with something.
fentanyl. Yeah. But I mean, what she was using, regardless of the fentanyl, was dangerous and um, probably could have killed her regardless.
Oh yeah,
When you
totally.
take drugs, even as simple, I mean, out here in LA, I know to you guys this might sound crazy. I said even as simple as cocaine, like to a lot
Mm,
of people that's crazy, but out here, really so many people do cocaine. It's a very common drug. And
yeah.
because it's so common, people are less cautious of who they're buying it from, what source it's coming from. And that's how things like this happen, where,
Yeah.
fentanyl gets intertwined and so many people die of that. I mean,
Hmm.
people get hooked on fentanyl alone. That's why, drug
True.
dealers put it in the drug. For Demi, she says that she was at a photo shoot, just a typical day for her. And as she was taking the photos, she got to thinking how miserable she was with her life and with sobriety. Like, what's even the point of being sober if I'm this miserable?
Hmm.
Right. So that night she goes home and, like you said, she
Hmm.
had a bottle of red wine, a whole bottle, and ended up going out to a party where she ran into her old drug dealer. Now, the documentary shows photos, probably from like Snapchat or like an Instagram
That's
message,
kind of what it looked like. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
of that night, letting you into her personal life, showing like this isn't exaggerated, this is really what happened. And she said, she's like, I literally just went to this party, I relapsed on alcohol, and I just went to have a good time and hang out with my friends. But
Right.
by a twisted turn of fate, I ran into my old drug dealer who I hadn't seen for years, who I hadn't been in contact with.
Like, what are the
And
odds?
yeah, what are the odds? And he was there. And, she says that that night when she ran into him, she relapsed on drugs so hard that she took drugs she had never taken. So that night, she
Hmm.
says she took a cocktail of meth, oxy, Molly, weed, and alcohol. And for those listening who don't know, I mean, many people mix weed and alcohol. Many
Hmm.
people even mix Molly with alcohol. You really shouldn't mix anything ever. I mean,
Right.
realistically, you really shouldn't be taking any of these drugs.
Exactly.
Yes.
What really surprised me was the meth. When you think about meth as a drug, it's associated with kind of like a dirty connotation. Like you don't
Hmm.
assume that somebody who has so much reach or so much money would be taking a drug like meth.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's not a
But
party drug.
right, yeah,
You know,
exactly.
people don't casually take meth at parties. I mean, I would be like, I'm getting out of this party ASAP
Immediately.
if I
Yeah.
see any meth. I don't even know what meth looks like, but um yeah, that's crazy. That is
Yeah,
just insane. Right.
you're with celebrities, so you really do have access to anything you want.
Hmm.
It wasn't the shock that she had access to it. It was the shock that that was the drug of choice. That really shows the desperation because it's like, I'm sure she agrees that there's kind of a bad connotation with meth. And
Yeah.
that just wasn't her mindset. At this point, I'm sure she was already on Molly. She was already drunk. So her mindset really wasn't, how's this going to look?
Hmm.
you know?
Right. Yeah, she was
Um,
just so desperate to get it at that point. And she said, in reaction to all of those drugs that she had taken that night, that she's surprised that that didn't kill her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which was kind of what I was saying earlier. Like fentanyl, of course, is deadly and can be lethal. It's just such a difficult drug because you don't know how much you're taking.
Mm-hmm.
But mixing things like what she mixed, much less mixing them all together, that's crazy. Like it is crazy that she didn't die, or at least OD right there. Like that is wild. Unfortunately, because she relapsed so hard, she got extremely high and started chasing that high. So 2 weeks after the party, when she came down, she began experimenting with other drugs that she hadn't tried, which were crack and heroin. Even saying it, like using Demi Lovato and heroin or crack or meth in the same sentence seems very strange. But what was more shocking was the picture they showed of her when she had taken crack for the first time, that photo of her face where her eyes.
Oh
her
my gosh.
eyes. I could, and it makes me so sad because obviously, I mean, we've known for years Demi Lovato has gone through, sobriety and then relapsing and addiction. And it really is, I mean, it's sad for anyone, but someone who we've known and kind of grown up watching and listening to, it's just so sad to see someone struggle. And you can see it in the documentary how
it affected her.
Yeah. Like she just seems like a sad person. Like I just wish, I hope she gets the help she needs.
Even when she was strung out, even when she was taking heroin, she was performing.
Yep.
And that's what's crazy. So that's what makes this just 1,000 times more shocking. And, after she's talking about experimenting with heroin and crack, it goes back to her friends who are saying they really had no idea. They had no idea that she was taking those drugs. She's really good at hiding things. And all they had known was that she relapsed on drinking. Because she told them, she texted them and said, I'm thinking about drinking again or like having a drink again. They do say though that looking back now, there were red flags and maybe they just didn't see them, but
it's hard to see that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, did you hear what her sober companion said?
Yeah.
She said, there were red flags and maybe they should have noticed. Like, for instance, they would have game nights and it looked like, Snapchat footage or something of their game night. And Demi would just disappear. So the one night, her friend went upstairs to the bathroom, found Demi on the bathroom floor. She had tinfoil and I believe she said she was doing meth, I believe.
Or heroin. She was injecting it, or no, smoking it.
No. She was injecting it. She had a needle sticking out of her arm.
Okay.
Or something. Stick a needle somewhere.
Yeah.
So the friend said, I can't keep doing this. And I guess it does get to a point where you've been through this so many times and you hate to say that because you don't want to be that friend that gives up on someone. And I've never been in that situation, but I can only imagine it's like you want to be there for your friend, but it's like, how many times can we keep doing this? So that's when the friend said it was kind of the breaking point where she was like, I can't keep doing this type of thing.
Especially because that friend was her sober companion. So it's somebody who also struggled with addiction at some point in their life. And that's got to be hard to be around too,
to know that there's drugs like in the same house you're at and you think it's a safe space. And
that's true.
After she admits to trying heroin and crack, and she says that she was just having fun with it. She says, it was just like experimenting. But then she traveled to Bali for a few weeks and realized that she was actually like very dependent on it. Her body had become dependent on heroin. And at that time, she wrote sober. So while she was in Bali and while her body was coming down off of this heroin high and she didn't have any to use, she decided, okay, I'm going to get clean. She really tried to stay away from it during the trip. When she returned back to LA, of course, she kind of got sucked back into that lifestyle again. They showed footage of her performing, as I mentioned earlier, one day before her overdose. And she's up on the stage and sober is about to start. And she's like, looks like she's so ready for it. She's like vibing out. And then her cue comes and she just like stares out and makes a joke. She says, shit, I forgot the lyrics.
Yeah.
And everybody laughs. Every person laughs because they think, oh, it's so funny. She's put together. It's fine. Like it happens.
They
But
just don't know what's happening behind closed doors, which is, it's
But
sad
then
for her.
she walks out.
yeah,
Doesn't she just leave?
Yeah.
Like she doesn't, I mean,
who
like,
knows what happened afterwards? But
right. Maybe I'm sure she came back out.
so this is kind of where things start to really unravel, and we get a super in-depth look about what happened with the overdose. There's been a lot of speculation, but she puts all the rumors to rest. She says the next night after this concert, where we see footage of her forgetting the lyrics, she goes to a party to hang out with some friends. At the party, they're not aware that she's using.
Yeah.
So she is obviously high for this party. And then a few friends come home with her and she says to them, hey, I'm going to go to bed. This is at 5:30 a.m. Instead of going to bed at 5:30, she calls her drug dealer. And that is where episode 1 ends.
Yeah, just when we get to the part that we're all waiting for. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the eye of the storm. Like right when it's about to hit the fan, they cut us and make us wait for episode 2. But listeners don't have to wait because we're about to spill it all right now. So in episode 2, really the focal point of this is her assistant, her former assistant, and we get to hear her point of view, which is really an important point of view because she's who found Demi.
She essentially was the one who saved her life.
Saved her life.
Yeah, I mean, no, she definitely is the one who saved her life because of that 911 call, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
Her assistant arrives to her house to wake her up early in the morning for a doctor's appointment, and her door is closed. So instead of waking her up, she goes downstairs and kind of chats with other people in the house, waiting for Demi to get up. But when she doesn't get up, she returns to Demi's room and opens the door to find her unresponsive in bed. So at this point, instead of calling 911, her assistant calls Demi's security. While they're waiting for security to show up, her friends start showing up to the house too. So at this point, again, before 911 is even called, there are a ton of people in the house, a ton of people around Demi, her security, her friends, her assistant. And then
I was kind of wondering how all these people were finding out.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that the friends showed up because they were finding out. I think, I mean, the way that it sounded to me was that they were literally just showing up. Like at this point,
maybe they were doing something.
Yeah, like maybe her house is kind of like a revolving door. Like her friends just come and go at any point.
Remember one of her friends, she was asking them to stay over. Was that the night of the overdose?
Yeah. I believe it was.
Yeah, because she was like
choreographer, I think.
Yes, she was like, please stay, like whatever. And they were like, no, like I gotta get home. And then I think her choreographer was like, well, let's do like brunch in the morning.
Let's hike, she said.
Or hike, yeah. And Demi was like, okay. So I'm sure maybe they thought like they were getting together to go hike or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I mean, I feel like in friend groups like that, the friends just come literally in and out of the house.
Yeah.
You see that with Ariana Grande too, because I feel like she posts a lot on Instagram, like her Instagram stories, and there's always at least like 5 people at her house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So her assistant says that she snuck away to call 911, which I thought was very interesting. Like she knew that this was going to be bad PR and that Demi and, her team wouldn't want it to get out. So she sneaks away to call 911, and her team is heard on the other end of the 911 call. They played the 911 call in the documentary. And her team specifically asks the 911 operator not to use sirens when they come to not cause commotion. And the operator says, no,
this is a medical emergency.
Yeah.
I can't control that.
That's insane.
Right. He basically was like, she needs attention. We're putting the sirens on. Like, no. Yeah. Then her assistant talks about what happened when paramedics arrived. So they came up to Demi's room. They kind of took her vitals. She was unresponsive. So they gave her Narcan, which for those listening who don't know, Narcan is a drug that reverses the effects of an overdose. It does work many, many times, and it's very expensive. But basically it like starts your heart back up. At this point, the Narcan had been delivered to Demi's system, but she began turning blue. So it didn't look like it was working the way that they had usually hoped. People listening might be familiar with shows like Live PD.
Mhm.
In Live PD, they actually use Narcan a lot for people who have OD'd in cars. And you see in those, they're like asleep and then the Narcan is delivered and then they wake up. They are usually aggressive. They don't know what happened. But it's like a very quick, like, oh, I'm awake now.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm alive. And that wasn't what happened here. At this point, she's obviously very close to death. And her assistant knows, her friends know, her security knows, 911 knows, but her friends and family outside of that don't know.
That was
And
insane to me.
Yeah.
yeah,
I think a lot of them thought she was dead because they were getting like, I'm so sorry texts and like,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry about Demi and they're
yeah,
like, what are you talking about? Like, I just saw her
No,
last night.
her mom said she figured maybe Demi got in a bad car accident.
Yeah.
She wasn't really sure what was going on.
yeah.
So yeah, I can only imagine feeling so far removed from that. You're getting texts like, I'm so sorry to hear about Dem. It's like, what are you even talking about?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, people might be thinking, why would her mom think she got in a car accident? But again, it's important to reinforce that until the overdose happened, her family didn't even know that she was
Yeah.
using these drugs. So when they
Mhm.
hear like, oh, I'm so sorry, the first thought is not drug related because they don't know that she's using. But a lot of people that were close to her, a lot of her friends and family actually heard about the news from media. So like her sober partner who found
Yeah.
her using heroin was on a flight, and when she turned on her phone with everybody else, people were
Yeah.
gasping and saying, "Oh my God, did you see this about Demi?" And for her, it's a little bit different because that's her best friend and sober
Mhm.
companion. And that's how she got the news, was through the news, you
Yeah. And
know?
that
So
story with her, I felt horrible because you think what chain of events or what events like could have happened to make this outcome different. Like her
yeah,
friend, the sober companion, said
Yeah.
Demi had asked her to go out that night before, but she said, I can't, I have to be on a flight to New York. So I'm sure she's probably
Right.
thinking when she turns on her phone on the flight, like, what if I had stayed and gone to this party with her? Like, could I
Yeah.
have prevented? And I'm sure a lot of people in her life thought, what if I did this to
Mhm.
help her, I guess how can you not think of that? But I just felt bad when she was telling that story. She turns on her phone. She's probably thinking like, what if I just stayed, you know?
Mhm.
and I think she says that actually. I think after she talks about it, I think she says, I look at the situation and wonder, could I have done anything differently?
Yeah.
And I'm sure her choreographer, who was supposed to spend the night,
Mhm.
Yeah.
tells her story for that same reason. Like, she really wanted me to stay. What if I would have just stayed? Like, would this
Mhm.
have happened? At this point, Demi is hospitalized. And this is what we know as fans, as average people. We all saw the headlines. We saw that she OD'd and that she was in the hospital. But what
Right.
was really happening? What was going on in the hospital? What was going on with her body during this time?
I, I'm a queasy person, and watching this, I was like, oh,
Yeah,
it
I'm
was
not a
like,
queasy person. And watching
oh
this, I
my,
was like,
yeah, it's a lot. So I'm
yeah.
not even going to talk about it. You guys can take
So
that.
basically what happened was her oxygen levels were trending low. They were just continuing to go down even after the Narcan was delivered, even after she was in the hospital. So what they ended up doing was, trigger warning for anybody who doesn't like gore or
Yeah.
blood, skip like
Me.
15 seconds forward. They put a tube in Demi's neck that pumped blood out of her body and cleaned the blood in a machine and then pumped it back into her neck. But the part that really got me was when Demi's mom said, worried, what if she wakes up and tries to take the tube out? And the doctor said, she can't. It's literally stitched into her neck.
Mhm.
Which I was trying to picture it, and I for some reason can't picture how that's possible.
No, not at all.
I don't know. I'm interested to see if she has like a scar on her neck from that. I know in the
Yeah.
documentary, her hair was to one side. So I wonder if
Mhm.
that was covering up anything. I don't know. She has a shaved head now. So
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Google
she
it.
does.
I
She
don't know.
does.
So
It's probably out there.
I know she said, which I guess you're thinking she had an overdose. Me personally, I don't really, I guess, think that much further into it, but she was saying all the things that had happened to her through that overdose. She had 3
Mm,
strokes, a heart attack. Would she have organ failure? She has blind spots in her vision now. She can't
she can't
drive.
drive.
I guess I just don't think of those things because I've never gone through it or been close to someone who's been through it, but that
Mhm.
was just crazy.
She's so lucky to be
Yeah,
alive.
she is.
Honestly, a lot of people don't even survive like one stroke or one heart attack.
Or using meth one time.
Right.
Or
Right.
using heroin one time. I mean, think about how lucky she is. Seriously, think
Mhm.
about that. And she says that she has blind spots in her eyes, like what you said. And when she pours like milk into cereal, sometimes she misses the bowl
Mhm.
or things
Yeah.
like that. But actually, when she first woke up, she was like frantic because she couldn't see anything. She was
Yeah.
completely blind when she first
Mhm.
woke up, and nobody really knew if that was going to fade or if she was just going to be blind for the rest of her life. That was a really iconic moment in this first part of the documentary, these first 2 parts, because Demi says that what inspired her to really do it, really get clean, wasn't the overdose, it wasn't the strokes and the heart attack
Mhm.
and all of that. It was the fact that when she woke up, she couldn't see her sister, and she
Yeah.
didn't want to live that way. She didn't want to live in a world where she couldn't see her sister.
Mhm.
Um, and I thought that that was really sweet. I have a close relationship with my sister too, and
Yeah, me too.
it is ironic how you would think that fame and fortune and people depending on you is what would get somebody clean, but at the end of the day it could be as simple as, I don't want to lose the relationship I have with my family member.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
you
think she was
know
like her younger sister too.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. And her younger sister spoke to something in this episode about how she's been living and has family members who have gone through addiction, and it's easy for people to say, oh, your sister is choosing drugs over a relationship with you, or this person is
mhm.
choosing to drink because they don't care about you. But she said it's so much more than that. Like, it's a sickness, an illness, that it's just so much deeper than someone saying, I'm
Yeah.
choosing drugs over you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And that's, again, like a big takeaway from this documentary isn't even to humanize Demi Lovato, it's to humanize drug addicts as well.
Mhm.
Because she's giving you an inside look to something that isn't special to her. Her relapse, her addiction isn't just Demi's relapse and Demi's addiction. A lot of people struggle with this, and
Yeah.
average people, people you run across in your daily life struggle with this. So just kind of opening your heart and understanding that a lot of times it isn't what it might seem on the surface, I think is really important. As episode 2 comes to a close, they get into something that I was not expecting. So at this
Oh
point,
my
I was
God.
like, okay, so now we know what happened and that's it. And the documentary is over. And that's not true, because a lot of what comes next is something that even I, who does a lot of pop culture research, did not know. They switched to asking Demi how she got involved with these harder drugs. And her friends kind of weighed in on this, especially her sober companion who can speak to this.
Mhm.
And she says when somebody relapses, they usually don't return to the same drug that they were using before. So for Demi, she said that she was initially using, when she was, first addicted, she was using a cocktail of Coke and Xanax. These are both very common drugs, especially in Hollywood. They're drugs that a
Mhm.
lot of people are open about. And she was mixing those two together. But when she relapsed, she called her dealer to get her Coke and her Xanax, her usual go to. And he didn't have that, but
Mhm.
instead offered her the quote next best thing, which was heroin and crack.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not sure about that, but
Right.
this is not my forte. I am not a heroin or crack user, so I can't speak to that.
Mhm.
And because she was in the mindset of, I'm ready to do drugs, she just agreed. She was like, I'd wanted to try these things and it seemed like a good opportunity. So I jumped on it. The episode ends with a cliffhanger. She says that night, when she got the drugs from him, not only did she OD on the drugs and the drugs that were laced with fentanyl,
Mhm.
But the same dealer who she had been in contact with for many years and had bought from many times took advantage of her. And she also says that this was not the first time that this person had taken advantage of her.
Yeah.
She doesn't specify in episode 2 what that means, but I think we
Mhm.
can safely assume it means that while she was unconscious or really, really high, he abused her sexually.
Well, she
Yeah.
says when she was in the hospital and she woke up, the doctor said, "Did you have consensual sex that night?" And
Mhm.
she said yes, because I think that's all she
She had a
could say.
flash and she like remembered him on
Mhm.
top of her.
Mhm.
But looking back, she's thinking that was not consensual. I
Yeah.
was in no state of mind to give
Mhm.
consent. And he basically left her to die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
left
she
her for
was
dead.
like passed out. I wouldn't say she was unconscious, but like he had to have known that she wasn't doing well. And there's footage of him leaving her house at like, what was it, like 8 or 9 in the morning. And she was found at like 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who is this guy? Because
Well,
he's
that's
a
what's
piece of
so
shit.
interesting. That's what's so interesting to me because he's a Hollywood drug dealer who's dealing
Hmm.
drugs laced with fentanyl, which, by
Yeah.
the way, is what killed Mac Miller. Mac Miller took cocaine
Yes.
laced with fentanyl.
Yeah.
And you would think that the storyline would not be Demi Lovato is using heroin and crack. It would be
Hmm.
this person that you probably know because he runs in circles of A-listers.
Mhm.
So I'm
Right.
sure if you Google him and if you can find him, he's probably a face we've seen somewhere. Why
Yeah.
is he
He should
not
be in
being?
jail.
Yeah. And who knows? I mean, he might be. I honestly don't know because
Yeah.
until this point in my life and in watching the documentary, I didn't know that she had a drug dealer who was consistent and that
Hmm.
was the same person who was taking advantage of her and all of this stuff. For all I know, she could have bought heroin off the streets, you know?
True.
Right.
It's true. Or at that party, maybe just somebody had it and they weren't a drug
Mhm.
dealer, but they bought it from somebody. But this is really interesting because it says, no, it's one person who knew her, who had been
Yeah.
consistently taking advantage of her, who knew that she was, at the end of the day, obviously, if you're a drug dealer, it's not like you're a great person,
Mm.
but to know her or to have been intimate with her or to have been her drug dealer in the past and not hear from her for years. She's a public figure. You know her story.
Mhm.
You know that she is clean and that she's trying to stay clean. So why are you offering
Yeah.
worse
Yeah.
substances? Like, why? Obviously the why is to make money, but what type of sick world do we live in where that quick buck for you, because heroin and crack are
Yeah.
not the same type of money as the drugs that she was using? What type of world do we live in where that is the priority to you over somebody who is helping so many people and inspiring so many people?
Hmm.
And in what
Yeah.
world do you think it's not going to get out eventually?
Episodes 3, I did not watch episode 3 yet, and you guys didn't either, but whatever happens in 3 and 4, I hope something happens to him.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, my boyfriend was like, "Go watch episode 3." And I was like, "No, because when I have this conversation, I want to feel like the audience feels, like what is
yeah.
Yeah.
going to come next?
Right.
Like I really want to know." And
Hmm.
of course, right when we're finished recording, I'm turning it on.
Yeah. I know, I might too.
I thought it was funny too. And that at the end, when they were rolling the credits, the doctor that was working on her, someone said, like, "Did you know who this person was?" And he said, "I didn't want my work to be affected just because I
Right.
knew who she was."
Hmm.
So I thought that was funny. I'm
That's
like, how do
crazy.
you really not know? But I guess he didn't. I don't know.
What's to come is going to be unfiltered and more telling than anything we've ever,
Hmm.
heard about before. And it's coming straight from the source. So there's no need to fact check it. I mean,
Yeah.
she's the one that
Yeah.
was affected by this, and hopefully this person was caught. One thing that they talk about in episode 2, which I thought was really ironic, and I hadn't thought about it until she said it, was that she was this close, like so close to being part of the 27 club and losing her life when she's 27, just like so many others had.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And she celebrated her 28th birthday and made it through, and it's not her story, that's not her legacy. So now that she is getting it off her chest and can be open and honest, let's stick around for episode 3 and 4 and hope that going forward, we can all kind of support her as a human, not just an artist. Maybe look at people that we have in our life who are struggling with mental health or eating disorders or addiction a little bit differently. You guys have been amazing. I'm so glad that you were here to break this down with me and give all the tea on what the hell happened with this overdose, because we really needed to know. Of course, like I said, if you haven't watched it, I still encourage everybody to go watch it, just as I do with all my deep dives, because there's something special about hearing people have a conversation as we are and thinking, wow, oh my God, I didn't think about that. But I also think this documentary specifically was really well put together, and seeing the faces of people talking about this and hearing their stories, it is special and it is interesting. So I definitely encourage that. But in the meantime, you can binge all of my episodes on any streaming platform, Megan the Morning Podcast, and my guests episodes. Tell everybody where they can find you guys.
We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you just type in Pop Up Tea or Pop Up Tea Podcast, we'll show up. And our Instagram is Pop Up Tea Podcast as well.
Yep.
Yay.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course, it was so much fun. I'm really glad you guys were here.